I'm looking at us on the screen, and I just can't go over the fact that we have, each one of us has a beard, and we each have the old man gray beard working. I mean, I just keep on focusing on that in my mind. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because we have such wisdom that we're imparting on all the people out there, or maybe it's just, maybe we all think we're younger than we are, which I think is the other side of it. I don't know if you guys have noticed that too as you're looking at the screens, but it's cracking me up.
Welcome to the Flywheel Effect, the podcast where ambition meets expertise in the world of luxury home services. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a small business owner, or a forward-thinking professional, this is your platform for growth, profit, and prosperity. Each episode, we dive deep into how to leverage data for smarter business decisions and share insights that help you transition from technician to visionary. Let's jump in.
Hello and welcome to the Flywheel Effect, sponsored by Vital. Now, I'm not even going to attempt it. Matt, tell everybody what Vital is, who's our sponsor.
Oh, baby, put me on the spot.
Right on the spot.
Vital helps luxury home service businesses improve in every way. We work with custom integrators and other custom luxury trades to help improve top and bottom line performance and reduce chaos throughout the whole organization, providing a business that increases freedom, value, and provides a rewarding atmosphere for everybody.
Now, that is an introduction to Vital, our great sponsor that we have that, is also kind of us. So anyway, Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. It has been a rainy, cold week in SoCal, and I'm hoping that the rain stops soon because this evening I'm doing my first at this amazing go-kart facility, outdoor go-kart facility about an hour away. So awesome. I've never raced go-karts in the rain, and I'm not looking forward to it if the rain doesn't stop. So we'll see. But
gas or electric?
These are electric.
Oh, those got some torque on them.
And they're crazy fast. Yeah, it's a full beautiful outdoor track. It looks like a Formula One track. It's unreal.
Now, are you going to get the speed like we saw when we did karting out in Barcelona when they was going like 175 miles an hour?
Not that one. I'm on level 2, so I'm currently a silver driver over there. The gold drivers get to be the fastest ones, but I think they're essentially the same karts. So the level 2, remember when they bumped us up to level 2 in Spain? I think that's the equivalent, or at least it feels equivalent. It's fast.
Yeah, that is fast. That's fast.
Yeah.
All right, cool. We have a great guest with us today. We got Jason Sayen. Jason, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic.
That's good. Now, Jason is a solopreneur, which we're going to get into a little bit. He runs a business that he calls I Am Sayen, which makes me smile every time I say it or read it. I have our best friends across the street, this gay couple, and their number one saying is just saying. They actually named their boat Just Saying, whenever they say something kind of rude and obnoxious. So it always reminds me of that. But anyway, you had a business that really focuses on process, that helps CI integrators and other service businesses fix their processes and systems, that allows their operations to catch up to their growth. I think you do it in an interesting way, right? You do it through process visualization, which I'd like you to get into a little bit more, and just to improve performance by focusing on process and systems. I think process and systems are probably the number one thing that small businesses fail on as they hit those inflection points of growth, right? But first, I want to hear more about what it's like for you, this wonderful Twitter/X term of solopreneur, with that whole community out there of people that are doing everything all at once. What's it like being a solopreneur?
It's exciting, scary, fun. It's everything all in one. Like it's unpredictable, but at the end of the day, it's all on you. Like you can make it succeed or fail, which is kind of the fun part, but it's not for the faint of heart.
Now, process, even though process we're talking when you have a large organization, when you are a solopreneur, you need to have your systems down to get all your stuff done.
Correct.
So you apply your own techniques to your own business, I imagine.
Yeah, in some way, shape, or form, right? Like in the beginning, every business, even though I'm a process-focused business, there's a part where you have to figure things out as you go to figure out the thing that you're going to deliver and sell. But, interesting comment. I am at an inflection point in my business with software And so I am going to do my own process visualization exercise next week because the software I was using is not working. And rather than just go look at a bunch of different pieces and get feedback from other solopreneurs, I'm going to do my own process visualization first to really understand where all the gaps are so then I can identify the right software.
All right, that gives me two questions. One, which type of software are you talking about?
So more of like CRM project management. So I've been using Monday.com since I started my company.
Okay.
And so, and I think this is always interesting. I tell this story to a lot of companies that ask me like, what's the best CRM? And so I'm like, well, when I started off, I just had leads coming in and I had them stuck in my head or in a notes app of people I talked to or in a Word document. And then I went to an Excel spreadsheet because it was a better way to organize it. And then I outgrew that. And then I just went into Monday because I was doing some work with a consultant that was in Monday and it was just super easy. But now I've outgrown that. Now I couldn't have gone from where I started to Monday or where I'm about to go because I just wasn't ready yet. But so many people make that mistake of like trying to find the unicorn best software, not even just to solve today's problems, but they're trying to solve future problems that they don't even have yet. And that's the wrong approach.
Yeah, simple. My separate question is, what is process visualization? I think that we gotta hit that right out of the gate because I really have no idea. And I'm sure many of our listeners don't either.
It's just by visualizing your process in a visual format. So they're like adults have 4 learning styles. We learn through listening to people speak. We learn through reading books. We learn through visually seeing things. And then we learn through hands-on approach. 60% of adults are visual learners. So when you can see something visually, it helps you understand it better. So have either of you ever built something from IKEA?
Yes.
Or played with Legos as a kid? I was huge with Legos, right? All their instructions are visual. It's a universal language, and people just instantly kind of understand it. And so I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, and when I pursued Lean Six Sigma, I fell in love with process maps because to me, like when I could see it, it just was obvious. And so the first client that approached me after a conference said, I need a way to take what's in my head and get it onto paper so everybody can see how the work gets done. And to me, that's visual. Like a stack of written SOPs and checklists doesn't help you see things. So process visualization is the ability to see how the work gets done.
Okay. I'm sure Matt has a couple questions, but I need you to define Lean Six Sigma black belt, which is also one of those terms which most people have no idea what it means.
Yeah. So Lean Six Sigma is a set of tools and methodologies that you can use to eliminate waste in a process. And so there's different certification levels. There's white belt, yellow belt. I started at green belt and I got my green belt and my black belt. And traditionally it's been used in manufacturing. So I spent 10 years working at JL Audio and their production manager was a master black belt that worked for Bose. And so he used the tools to develop their assembly lines. So I know both of you guys have been in the business a long time. So if you've ever been to a manufacturer, when they build something at the end, there's going to be a percentage that go into inventory, finished goods, and then a percentage that fail. And so that failure rate is a number that they always want to lower. And typically they just try to figure out how to solve that problem. With Lean Six Sigma, you try to solve it along the way so you can reduce that waste along the way. So really simple, at JL Audio, if there was 12 people on an assembly line, the first step for every person was to check the previous person's work before they started. And so that allowed them to catch things faster, minimize waste, lower defects. I've heard stories about people that go to China and Brent, if your job is to put 4 screws into this part and my job is to put 6 and I get the part from you, you didn't put the 4 screws in, guess what? I still put the 6 screws in, right? And that ends up being like a high defect ratio. So Lean Six Sigma is just a set of tools to easily identify those things. And over the last decade, it's been moved into the services business. So American Express has a main headquarters right around the corner from where I live in South Florida. And one of my friends is a master black belt. And there's a group of Lean Six Sigma black belts that the entire time at American Express, they're just trying to identify problems and use Lean Six Sigma to solve them.
All right, that's good. So I'm going to bring up 2 different things. Six Sigma, I think is really interesting. History of that, you probably know, but I think it's really cool. Is how it came out of the GE culture, and what Six Sigma means. There's a reason for it. If you look at a standard deviation, it's 6 sigmas from the mean. So I think it's 99.95% error free is what 6 sigmas from the mean is. I think 3 deviations is like 90%. So it's having as close to perfect as possible, driven by the process to get there, from beginning to end. It's just like when you think about having a 99.95 error, having a error rate that is basically 0.05, it's pretty wild. So
Yeah.
that's good stuff.
Yeah, and it's a very structured way to get there too. Like there's all these tools. It's very driven by statistical analysis.
Now, I also think that most people hear that their only frame of reference for Six Sigma black belt is Jack Donahue from 30 Rock, who was also a Six Sigma black belt, but obviously portrayed it as the biggest jerk you can imagine. So I know that's not you, Jason.
Hey, Jason, I got a question for you. So, I know your story pretty well. We're good friends. And I always found it fascinating how you got into that, right? So I think walk us a little bit through that shift, because I think for me, as I hear you tell that story, I think about, I interact with a lot of people every day, and there's some people who feel like they're just not in their passion, or, that they're kind of stuck in a rut. And, you made a pretty significant shift and really doubled down on what seemed to interest you. And I think you're making a huge impact on the world because of it, right? And so tell us a little bit about your story on how you discovered Lean Six Sigma, what took you there, and looking back on it, what you thought about that decision.
Yeah, and so I think what's interesting, actually, what happened before that, which ties in with Brent and him loving the name of my company, which started before Lean Six Sigma. So I've been in the industry for 30 plus years. I started out in car audio. Matt, you and I shared stories about the car audio days. And after being an installer for a number of years, I went to go work on the manufacturer side. So I started off in sales training and then spent a lot of time in like sales leadership roles. 10 years at JL Audio, that's where I was exposed to Lean Six Sigma. And I always saw chaos, not just with like the companies I worked with, but even just the businesses I interacted with, and thought, wow, this could be applied. But I didn't really know how to get there yet. So I left car audio, went to go to the CDA channel, again, working for manufacturers. In 2014, some companies started reaching out to me saying, hey, you're a smart guy, you have a lot of experience. We'd like to pay you to do a case study or pay you to build a sales and marketing plan. I thought, oh, this is interesting. Like, I love helping people. I could get paid for my advice and expertise. And so I started my company, I Am Sayen. So the backstory, 2014, hashtags like Just Saying didn't exist. But full disclosure, one of my early clients was Noah Kaplan from Leon Speakers. And Leon ran a marketing ad at that time that said, I am Leon. And the concept was, these are all the people in the company that embody what we do. And I was struggling because I didn't really know why people were hiring me. I knew I was talented and I could provide them with information, but I didn't know how to define my service. So I called it I Am Sayen. And my last name just had a nice ring to it. And so that's kind of the origin story of my name. Fast forward to nowadays, it's like, yeah, people get a lot of grins out of it. So I started in 2014. As both of you know, selling project-based consulting is not scalable, right? It was not clear what problem I was solving. I had no way to really market it. And so it was just kind of a thing in the background. So 2016, I worked for Savant, and they went through a major restructure. There was about 100 of us that kind of got let go. And so I was, first time it's ever happened to me, and I was left sitting there like, what am I going to do next, right? I can go work for another manufacturer. And I decided to go to school, and that's when I decided to go pursue Lean Six Sigma, was out of that kind of event. And when I went through it, to get your black belt, you have to basically take the tools and deploy them in a company. So free consulting. One of my friends owned a plumbing contracting business. He just took it over from his father, and he said, I could use your help. And so I used Lean Six Sigma to improve some efficiencies by 50%, increase some savings of $50,000 through looking at process. And I said, man, your business is the same as these integrators. They could really learn from this. And so I started talking about the concepts at different buying group conferences, which is when that first person said, hey, I need to hire you. And that's kind of where it started.
That's cool. And so that you've been doing this for I guess you started 2014, but that sounds like a couple years later. So you've been doing this for like 7-8 years?
Yeah, 2019 was the first customer that hired me to kind of do what I do now, but it's dramatically different. So as a solopreneur, like you never have the defined product or service right away. You just have to figure it out. Just like an AV integrator, right? Someone says, "Hey, you're pretty talented. Can you go install this gear in my house?" And of course, you're good at the little task, but you have to figure out how to define that service. And so 2019 was all about doing that. And then, of course, we all know COVID hit. And what was interesting was I was working from home. I was in a sales rep position, and our business grew, 20, 30% as every integrators did. And what happens when you have extreme growth? Processes and systems break, right? So all these companies started remembering I was the guy that talked about process, and I started getting phone calls. And so during COVID, things kind of blew up. And because of COVID, I was able to do it. Most people would not have met with me on Zoom to do what I do back then. But as a result, they had a lot of these challenges and they needed a solution. And so I was pretty busy in COVID managing both jobs and doing both things.
That's awesome. I mean, you bring up solopreneurship again, like, and let's actually go a little deeper in that. Like, when you look at home service companies and integrators, a lot of them start out as solopreneurs. I know it's not a term that's used for typically in the trades, but they're one-man shops. They're, the negative term is trunk slammer, right? But it's still just a one-man business trying to go out and hustle and do some work. And then but 90% of them never get out of that, right? I think they're stuck in their own little cycles of doing small jobs and hustling and buying stuff from a distributor or whatever it is. What is it that takes that? Let's talk about some advice when you have that experience of you taking a startup business on your own, growing it over the last 6 years into something that is now recognizable. People know you have a reputation, you're continuing to grow. What's the lesson for that startup tradesperson from what you've experienced, and how to apply it and how to drive that initial phase of growth?
Yeah, I mean, so some of the things that I wished I had learned, because it's like leaping off a building without a parachute.
Yeah.
So have the best parachute you can in terms of like, put the money aside, right? I think most people will say have 3 months, money set aside for what you need. I would have more than that, because otherwise if things kind of slow down, especially when things are out of your control, like the economy or other things, like you need that, right? And, have a solution to how you can explain to people how to solve their problem. A lot of integrators are like, "Hey, I'm an AV integrator. I can install a network. I can install a TV," but that doesn't really tell the problem you're solving for the customer. And and that's something I had to go through, even though I had a really high influx of demand early on. I had to go back and reiterate the problem I was solving, and I'm still always iterating on that, because when your message gets through and you're able to, get in front of more customers.
I think that's a solid point, Jason, that custom integrators struggle with, but also many other industries. And I think in particular, the more technical the industry, the more they struggle with market messaging, because they want to describe in technical detail what it is they do versus the actual pain points and problems they solve. And also what occurs to me in custom integration, and maybe you can help with this because I know you've studied it recently a lot, they're selling luxury goods, right? And so when they think about problem solving, are they really solving problems, or are they providing some lifestyle benefits? So how might we think about that differently?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, early on, I was known as the process guy, and I'm like, yeah, I can help you define your process. And guess what? The people that knew they needed that thing, I resonated with them. But there's so many people that need it that don't know that. And so you have to paint the picture of the problem that you solve. And I think with the luxury home services is, especially with like integration firms, like they solve multiple problems. They solve your network problem. They solve your entertainment problems. And so just really having a defined solution of the problems that you're solving, but also more importantly, like being able to qualify the customer properly and have them tell you what their challenges are. So then you can show them how you apply that challenge, as opposed to the blanket, like, I do everything technology in the home.
I'm looking at us on the screen, and I just can't go over the fact that we have, each one of us has a beard, and we each have the old man gray beard working. I mean, I just keep on focusing on that in my mind. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because we have such wisdom that we're imparting on all the people out there, or maybe it's just, maybe we all think we're younger than we are, which I think is the other side of it. I don't know if you guys have noticed that too as you're looking at the screens, but it's cracking me up.
It's funny, Brent, that you brought that up. I didn't notice it until you brought it up because I see you so often with your beard. It doesn't even occur to me. But also, I think I'm the youngest of the three of us, and damn it, I've got the most gray. What the hell is that all about? That's actually why I was rocking the mustache for so long, because I've known my beard is super gray, and the mustache was not graying. And for whatever reason, recently, it's it's there. So
Jason's is graying like where I started too. Like just here in this front, for a longest time, it looked like I just walked into a wall of wet paint every day. And so it just is. But I know that's a side note. I had to bring it up. I couldn't stop thinking about our beards. Jason,
Right.
you always have a beard? Because you got the shave and the beard. Is that it was all your look?
I've had a beard since like 2007 timeframe, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, but I'm not allowed to shave it now because then I end up looking younger than my wife. So
Oh, there you go.
I'm a lot older than I look, and so the beard kind of helps with that.
That's good. Yeah, I've been on and off beard since like 2000. A little bit of beard, a little bit of mustache, a little bit of clean hair length changes.
I've never done the mustache.
Matt rocks a great mustache.
He does.
My mustache makes me look. My wife says it makes me look Mexican, so it's what I have a mustache, and that could be a good thing. But she really likes Mexico. But no, I'm mostly beard. All right, let's dive a little deeper into process. I think that process is this word that everyone assumes they know what it means. But when it gets down to it, I don't think the details that go into process that you're talking about really are top of mind to people. And also, I don't necessarily think they understand how deeply process applies to everything.
Yeah, and a lot of times companies get overwhelmed when it comes to process. So they know they have a process problem. They know there's a lack of clarity on how the work gets done. But what I've encountered is they just don't know where to start. And the other challenge is they only know what's in front of them. They have no way to look at their blind spots. So the whole reason I approach things through what I call process visualization is to give you the lens to view your business through, so you can identify all the knowledge gaps, all the software gaps, all the alignment gaps within the company. Otherwise, it's whack-a-mole. It's like there's these 10 areas that I need to write SOPs or standards on, and I do those, and then another 10 pop up. And then it just seems like this endless cycle. Versus if you have this big picture strategy, it's overwhelming also, because people see it and they're just like, holy crap, like look at all the stuff I got to fix. And as entrepreneurs, we just want to fix it right away. And I run into that a lot, but at least you have a strategy, you have a detailed list of what it is you have to fix.
What's number one?
Oof. Number one, typically like software is a huge thing. Like people bought the wrong software. They bought software to fix a process problem. And so now the software is working against them. So software is always a big thing that I uncover with a lot of companies. And the other is just like silos between organizations. Like everybody has their lane they're supposed to be in, but they don't know how their lane affects others. And they're not sure what's happening upstream and downstream. And those are usually the two big things that we can identify right out of the gate.
So the lane, do you mean within the organization or the lane of the organization relative to other organizations?
The lane within the organization. So you can think of them as departments or functions, but
so let's look at an integrator. Like I think we all know integrators better than other trades. So you have installation, you have sales, you have back office finance, you have purchasing. These are all all departments. Which is of those departments, for the people listening to us, that whether or not they may call you, may not, but they still got to do process. Which is the first place that they should look that gets an impact on the business that is graspable?
So there's two areas that come to mind, and whether we're talking integrators or anyone in home services, that there's usually it's not clear how it's done, and it's a huge breakdown, and it literally causes the majority of the problems later on, which is not having a defined process around capturing scope of work, right? Because whatever's captured is where the proposal is going to get built, and if the scope of work's not accurate, then the proposal's not. But even there, having a handoff, because that's the second way to catch those gaps. So, project gets sold, and now it's getting handed over to purchasing, to production, and a lot of them don't have a clear handoff, and therefore they're just working on the information they have. And then guess what? It creates a ton of problems when they're out there trying to execute on the project.
Okay. So this is where Six Sigma comes in, right? You want to start upstream, fix the problems as you go, and constantly check through each one of those handoffs so that things don't cascade and build. And
Correct.
right. And so what you're saying is it starts at sales and project and quoting. Let's, whatever one of you were. And what is the process that they should? What are some of the things that they should look for in their process right through that period that could make a difference?
Well, first, it's like I like to, so I use a technique called value stream mapping, and value stream mapping is a way you capture the current state of how it's happening. And so by nature of just asking the company, like, how is this done today? Like usually when they have a process problem in their business, they just react to it and they're just trying to put the fire out. So when you're sitting in a space and you're just like, how does this happen today? You're like, that's a good question. I kind of do some of this stuff from memory. So yeah, let's talk about that. And usually within 5 steps, it's like, oh, yeah, this is where we run into this issue. And then it becomes okay, so how do we solve for that issue? And so the first step is just using value stream mapping as a way to kind of understand where all those gaps are. And then starting to figure out like, okay, so what is the way we're going to solve that problem? Everybody's agreeing this, non-standardized scope of work is killing us. Like, so what do we think the best solution is to fix that? And then we start getting into problem solving, which then leads us to creating an SOP. Like I get into this conversation a lot. I go to conferences and companies will say, yeah, if we just had a pre-wired checklist, like it would fix so many of our problems. Cool. I'll send you one I have that would probably work for 90% of what you do, but it's not going to fix the problem. The problem is you're not doing the work today, right? So the piece of paper checklist isn't going to do it. The software that automates it is not going to do it. What's going to fix it is changing your behavior.
And what are some of those behavioral changes in that spot that make a big difference?
Taking the time to follow the process, meaning taking the time to sit down and review a proposal with your team before it goes out the door. And that one comes up a lot. Oh yeah, we build a proposal and send it. We don't do a second set of eyes on it because we don't have time. And taking the time to do that, taking the time to have a kickoff meeting with your team to say, hey, we just sold this project. Let's everybody review it, make sure we have clients' contact information, all the trade contact information, all the documentation, et cetera, et cetera. It's taking that time.
I think you just highlighted you said these magic words of what stops the growth and development of businesses. We don't have time.
Yeah.
I think like when I hear those words you say this, that's where process fails. Even if they have a process, they don't follow because they don't have time. I think what you're talking about in what you're doing with people is moving them from putting out fires and doing to making sure it's done right, moving from the hare to the turtle, right? I think everyone wants to run around like they're busy. They're running around with their hair on fire, and that's really good because look at them, they're working their ass off. But that's not how to succeed. Is that the crux of what you're doing?
Yeah, 100%. Like I ask my clients all the time, like, how many projects do you have in process right now? Some of them can't even answer that. Some of them will say, I have 40 projects going on right now. Great. Do you know what stage they're all at? No, I don't. And if you don't know that answer, guess what? That means you're just waiting for those calls to come in to say, the GC's telling you like, hey, you need to show up tomorrow and finish this phase of the project because the site's ready, as opposed to being proactively in front of it, which if you're taking the time to have meetings and doing process, you can make that shift.
I think what you brought up, Brent, is really interesting, and I'd like to sort of double click on it because you said something about the reason companies get stuck or growth stagnates is because they're so busy, right? And I think what occurs to me are there's two things that occur to me here. One, I think Jason is definitely uncovering, and I think that's the idea that most businesses take on too much. They're entirely too ambitious about what can be completed in a certain amount of time. So they have too many priorities, which means nothing is a priority, which means they're moving 25 rocks a millimeter at a time versus choosing 2 boulders and carrying them together as a team for, feet or yards, right? And I think what what Jason's doing is, I'm guessing Jason is part of what your process is, your process mapping. You're helping them to uncover the highest priority things to work on, so they're not just busy trying to accomplish too many things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Like I was working with one of my clients and we do what we call a project status review. So we have this workflow that captures the journey of a project. Okay, the workflow is great. If this is the ideal process, now let's take your current projects and identify where they're at to see where the things are breaking down. So inevitably, they said, we need more staff. I said, who do you need to hire for it? Oh, we need technicians, right? You guys hear that all the time, right? We need technicians. So we identified, I think it was like a dozen projects, and then we identified the status. We identified what needed to happen next and what some of the outstanding issues were. And 90% of it was administrative. It was process change orders, place orders for products, scheduling items. And I asked him, I said, you told me you needed a project manager and you needed an office manager. All of these are office manager related items. Who do you think's easier to hire? Well, 100%. Finding someone to be an office manager is way easier because it could be remote, right? Hiring a trained PM that you can bring in that has experience is a lot harder. But yet, had we not done that exercise, they would have been chasing technicians and project managers, which is just throwing people at problems.
I think that's a perfect example, Jason, of what I was mentioning, and I'm glad that you kind of unpacked that, because oftentimes we think we need something in our business and we end up not needing that thing, right? And I think what's really cool about, I'll sort of take this back to a conversation we had a little while ago. What's really cool about the work that you do is it highlights those things. It's not just about process, right? That you're essentially giving them the opportunity to unpack all the good and bad shit in the business that needs to be dealt with, and getting it out in front of them to see. And the reason I know this really well is we've gone through your process, or I should say your old process at Vital. I can't wait to do it again and experience how much that's changed. But I know for us, we were looking at each other going, oh, what should we do about this thing that used to not be visible, but now it is very visible?
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. So I was working with a client last year, and this just goes to the benefit of the exercise, right? This was an in-person engagement. And we started off with asking everybody, like, where is the thing, or what's the thing that's happening that's keeping you from doing your job better? Like, as it relates to process, not finger pointing, but like, what's the thing every day? So the CFO of this company goes, so I have a check for $22,000 sitting on my desk, and I don't have an invoice to match it with. And so I've been spending 2 weeks trying to track it down so we can deposit it in our bank, right? And just that statement highlights so many things. Like, it could be affecting cash flow. So I asked them, I said, well, so who's supposed to generate the invoice? Well, that's the sales team. So of course I direct the conversation to the sales team. Why is there no invoice for this check? Well, sometimes we go out to meet with a client. All we have is a proposal, and they agree on site, and we don't want to leave without money, so we get a check. And the CFO goes, well, yeah, but do you understand that you just met with Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and the check probably came in from like XYZ Investments? And you see a couple people like go, never thought about that. And one of the salespeople raises his hand and goes, I didn't realize we were supposed to generate invoices. And then you see more light bulbs go off. And then another person raises their hand and goes, I don't know how to create invoices. You're like, wow, we just connected a bunch of dots here, like training opportunity, process opportunity. Like, now everybody sees the problem it caused with the CFO who's just spending time chasing checks. Like, that's gold right there. And that has nothing to do with like an SOP. I mean, ultimately it does. The SOP is just documenting the way it needs to be, but you got to talk through it.
Everybody wants text. And I think the reason people want text is they see text as productive, but they don't see office people as productive. They see them as a cost, as opposed to recognizing the value of administrative people and process to the job, where if they're sending their checks out and they're sending them out every day and they're doing work and they think everything is awesome, when in fact they just may be completely inefficient, losing money on everything they do.
Yeah.
I mean, Matt, you see this all the time too.
Well, yeah, well, that's why I was going to just jump in real quick, Brent. It's a great point. I mean, I just had a conversation with a custom integrator not long ago. Been around for probably 20 years. and they're hamstrung right now on the financial side of their business. They actually have no idea, how much money they're making, what their cash flow is, what they can spend on certain, growth aspects of the business, because they have focused so much on the production piece, which, again, don't get me wrong, billable staff, that's what keeps the ball rolling. But they don't have anybody internally who's managing the business. These owners are trying to do it themselves. And they've come to us asking for help. And it's like, look, awesome, we're happy to help you guys. You're 10 years beyond when you should have had this problem solved. And we tell them that not to make them feel bad, but to help them recognize we kind of have to go backwards a little bit before we go forward, right? Like we really gotta invest in this person, and then but first we have to know how much we can invest, and are you guys making money or not? So there's a whole bunch of cleanup work that has to be done. And so the work that Jason's doing, I think, is identifying those gaps quickly and where they should place those resources to patch up those issues.
Yeah, 100%. I did another exercise with another client, and we identified 6 projects that had completed pre-wire and were getting ready for trim, but they needed invoicing. And as the owner's telling me the status, the office manager's looking at him going, I had no idea we need to send invoices out. And he goes, yeah, I know, I've been too busy. It's a sizable integrator too. It's like 15 employees or
So that magic
3-4
word again.
million. Yeah. And I asked him, I said, how much money is that? And it was a couple $100,000 of outstanding invoices.
That they hadn't sent.
That they had not sent.
I don't know about you guys. When I get work done on my house, and when I was doing house flipping and stuff, it'd be shocking how long it would take people to get me an invoice.
Oh yeah.
Like don't you know that you may have, I like a mason, like a $20,000 job. Like try to find him to get the invoice, and they still don't deliver it for a month.
Well, and let's think about the psychology of that, Brent, because by the way, this is something we address commonly in our work. 6 months later, you get an invoice. How urgently do you feel that you need to pay that invoice?
0.
Medical bills. Right.
So it's not even conscious. I mean, I'm maybe speaking for myself, but I don't think it's conscious that you open that up and go, oh, I finally got that plumber's bill. I'm not going to pay this because it took him so long. It's not like a conscious decision. It's like, oh, the plumber's bill, interesting. And you sort of like, there's just no urgency to pay this thing because it's taken him so long to get it to you, right?
Yeah, for him, clearly.
But yet it is important to him because there was some trigger in his business, some pain that caused him to invoice you. And now he's like, Brent, I need that money. I need that money. I need that money. Right. And so
Yep.
it's like this complete opposite, or I should say it's a psychological misalignment that happens when you send out those late invoices. So there, I mean, of course there's the business fundamentals to it, but then there's also the psychological fundamentals of, if you truly want to get paid quickly, you got to invoice quickly. Like that's period end. There's a subconscious factor that when we get invoiced quickly, we will usually pay it more quickly.
Yeah, it's like, but yeah, I think the psychology is funny. I know so many trades guys who, where they are in their cash flow cycle, depending on how they answer the phone. They're going to pick up the phone and they're going to be in a bad mood. They're going to tear your head off, and you're like, oh, that guy didn't get paid this week, or he just had a big top parts job and he didn't know where money's coming from or something. And then he's happy the next day because he got someone to pay him. It's like, that's not how it works. Like, well, it is how it works, but it shouldn't be. You should focus on, like, let's have some flow here. This applies to solopreneurs more than anybody. The guys who are out there doing garage doors or, landscape or whatever that does this, it's not paycheck to paycheck. It's like, when can they find money and when do they think to remember to get it? I mean, There's no process at all to what they do.
Well, and I hear and see that on the service side too, where techs go out and service a client and it's low dollars. And then it's, those service invoices are going out much later, they're not accurate. And I see a shift where some companies are literally giving their techs the ability to stick the iPad in front of the client and say, pay the invoice, enter your credit card. And oh, by the way, at the same time, please give us a Google review, which is smart.
Yeah, it's great. My HVAC and one other, my HVAC company does that here. And they actually had one other piece that I think is brilliant is we don't have a service contract, but every time I have them come out for whatever reason, they say, here, our bill is X, you can pay it, the Google review. And third, if you'd like to sign up with the service contract, you won't get these invoices anymore.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, HVAC has it figured out, and I'll tell you what I think. And this relates to a conversation we had a while ago, so we probably shouldn't riff on it too much. But the HVAC industry matured so quickly once a bunch of institutional investors came in. Right? I mean, you notice how quickly that industry matured from top to bottom. I mean, the independents in HVAC are functioning as well, if not better, than the larger companies because of that.
And it's all process.
It's all process. It's process and it's process and it's software, right? Because you think about an industry, if you think about you're building software, you're going to go after the industries that you feel like have the biggest opportunity, right? Where you're like, hey, I can sell the most software into those industries. And once an industry realizes a problem can be solved with software, then all of a sudden the addressable market for that software grows, right? But until they realize that, you don't have as big of a market for that software.
Yeah, and I think I think Service Titan has taken advantage of that pretty hugely.
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there.
A lot of them.
Well, hey, Jason, so we've been focusing pretty heavily so far our conversation on custom integration companies, right? That's where we, spend a lot of our time. But I know you do a bunch of work in related industries or related companies. Can you tell us about one of the more interesting engagements you've had? I know you did some work for a window company and some others. What are some other interesting engagements you've had and maybe some takeaways? Our audience are all luxury home service contractors. What are some takeaways from outside of the industries you think you could bring back?
Yeah, so just last week I was out in California near your neck of the woods in San Diego, and it was working with like an irrigation systems company. And so they're a manufacturer, but they're similar to our space in terms of they're working with contractors and distributors. And what was interesting is they too are trying to shift their service model, much like we are in our industry. So right now, they sell a timer and irrigation system with other parts and pieces from other companies that tie into it. And they're in large scale installments. So think of like, universities, parks, et cetera. But right now they're servicing all the way up until their warranty. So 10-year warranty, they're pretty much servicing for free up until that point, which was interesting is because the field service guys were pushing back on having to shift to this, having a ticketing system and having an RMR plan. But through the afternoon exercises, we were able to shift that method of thinking because they could see that it was not scalable.
Interesting. So dive into that a little bit. What did you uncover, for as much as you can share with us? What did you uncover that changed their perspective?
So we talked through the current state, like how does service work currently? And everybody agreed like we can't continue. Technicians were on job sites taking phone calls from customers. And they had already started to put more of a centralized support system in place with ticketing, but techs were still taking calls. And, so we kind of put it out there like, well, what are you guys afraid of? Like, what is the risk? What's at risk? And what it was is all these field service guys really took pride in being able to solve their customers' problems. And a lot of times it would build the relationships to turn into extra business. And they were afraid if that got turned over to someone else, that they wouldn't be able to deliver on that. And so it's like, okay, so now that's out there. So cool. So then now how do we solve that? How do we make sure that your internal team can deliver that same level of service? And do you think if that did, would it free up your time? And everybody started to agree and really understand like, okay, so that's what we need to solve for. It's not the ticketing system and this massive change behavior. It's having the confidence that our other team members can solve these problems and now giving them the tools. And it was funny, like the floodgates opened up. You had guys that do it for 20 some years. Like, oh, I have this checklist and I have the top 6 problems everybody calls me for. I can share that with you and we can centralize that into a database and we can film a Loom video. And like, once we got over that mountain, it was pretty cool. So much that one of the guys wrote a workflow and like, he was inspired by the work we'd been doing. He's like, here's how it should be. And it's like, they got to their own future state on their own.
Wait, so techs were getting calls directly from the customers?
Yeah, because they were going to the job site when the product gets installed and they're helping train. And so it's like that's the guy that knows all the solutions. So if I have a problem, I'm just gonna call them.
Yeah, I
Got
mean
it.
that's normal consumer behavior, right? Like I want
Yeah,
to go
call
to
you know.
I want to go to the guy who knows my stuff,
Right.
who gave me the confidence that he knows what he's talking about. And isn't that the funny piece? I'll riff on this a little bit. That's sort of the funny piece that happens organically, I think, in these service organizations is you have the best technician or the best service person who gives a customer the most confidence that they can solve their problem. That guy ends up being, I mean, he's just inundated with calls. And so you reduce productivity in the entire system because you have your best people doing customer service work at that level simply because they're the most knowledgeable, when that obviously isn't the ideal or most productive.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, this company had done like their own team building exercise the day before because this was part of like an annual meeting. And one of the common things from field services is like we're working too many long hours, we're doing stuff on weekends. And then when we got to our discussion, they were able to tie the two. It was doing all this follow up because they felt committed to their customers, but they knew it wasn't scalable. But the risk factor was who else is going to provide that level of service? Well,
Yeah.
someone has to, so let's figure out how to solve that problem. And then that problem became much easier to solve.
I think you hear this from business owners a lot is, oh, I have to answer the phone because I have wealthy customers and they expect to be able to get me to answer their problems.
Right.
Because I hear it all the time. Integrator, why don't you sign up with, One Vision or whatever? So, I have to take the call because otherwise my customers are going to be mad in that they're not engaging with me. I'm like, are you sure? And I think 100% of the time, when integrators finally decide that they're able to abdicate or move away from that answering the phone, their customers are totally cool. There's no problems. I don't think
Well,
I've heard anyone that's really complained that their business tanked like they expected when they stopped answering the phone.
I mean, do I want to talk to Brent or do I just want to talk to someone
Right.
because I have a problem? Now, it's probably a percentage that want to talk to Brent, right? But the reality is they just want to talk to someone.
There's
Right.
there's always the initial fear. You can't get rid of that initial fear of Jason's not available. I got to talk to Steve, right? That initial fear. So what I think we have to solve for is let's just make sure whoever is taking that call instead of Jason recognizes the fear, recognizes where that customer's head's at, and solves the problem well. The issue comes in, it's not so much that it's not Jason. The issue comes in is whoever is taking Jason's phone calls is not able to solve the problem. If they can solve the problem, immediately that customer is like, oh, wow. It's sort of like an unlock. Like, oh, Jason isn't the only problem solver in that business. And now they're all of a sudden open to talking to Steve and Frank and Mark or whoever, right?
And that just really identifies training opportunities for your team. Like we're talking about service, but it's the same thing. Like, well, Matt has to build the proposals because he's the guy that does our proposals. Well, what happens when Matt goes on vacation or Matt is too busy doing something different? Well, Brent can't build proposals the same way Matt does. Well, then let's train Brent on that.
Yeah. Yep. It's so funny you bring that up, man. You just took me back to the celebration day when I no longer had to do my own proposals in my custom integration business. And it wasn't pretty for the first 6 months because although I thought I had done the work to spell out how it should be done, of course, there were a lot of gaps. But man, once those gaps were filled, it was like, what a joyous occasion that was, right? One of those big reliefs of not only do I not have to do it, but frankly, this person's doing a better job now that that's their primary responsibility.
So Matt, how long did that process take? And then when was the light bulb moment of I finally feel free?
It was a long time ago, but I'll do my best to try to remember it. It was probably 18 months of delaying what should have taken place, right? So it was 18 months of me thinking about doing it and coming up with all the reasons why I should, but it won't work well. And then at one of our quarterly meetings, the team essentially recognized that like this just needs to happen. So it wasn't even a me thing, it was the team thing. the team said, hey, we're ready to do this. Let's just make it happen and free you up to do what you need to do, because it became a constraint in the business. As we looked at the constraints of the business, the team said, like, hey, if we take this off your plate, can you go do these other things that you need to do, which was business development, in that case. And
then how long after that did you feel like it had finally gotten off your plate?
probably about 6 months. Yeah. Because like I said, it was a little messy for the first 6 months, but it immediately saved probably 20% of my time. So this guy was doing 80% of it, and I had to answer questions, and ultimately from day one, I had challenged him and said, hey, I need you to write down the standards. I don't care if you've got a freaking college ruled notepad that you write the standards in. I need you to document them. I don't want you calling me, asking me questions, and then I've got to answer the same question 3 weeks later. And he agreed to that. It's like, okay, cool. So if I call you with a question, you'll answer it. I said, I will answer your questions every time. I just don't want to answer the same questions. And that worked out well, because he documented things, and eventually it went from his notepad to an SOP. And again, it wasn't perfect, but I would say 99% of the time he was able to put proposals together that, of course, I didn't end up being the salesperson on. There was another salesperson. I wasn't even involved in sales at one point in the integration company, and it was great.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I think that's great. It's, you and I talk about our journey of exercising, being fit, and it's like the same thing. And even though people get sick of hearing it, it's like you don't get fit immediately the day you decide to go to the gym. You start incrementally feeling better, and then one day you realize, like, wow, I'm in better shape. And it's the same with process. Like I tell people, like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, find the problem you can solve that makes a huge impact. So to your point, very quickly, when the team decided to start doing proposals for you, you had 20% of your time back, and then eventually you got more. And
Yeah.
I think that's like a roadblock a lot of people have struggle with, because they think if they're going to put all this work in, that it's just going to change right away, and it's not.
Yeah. Yep. I think that's a really great point, Jason.
So there's one other thing I wanted to cover, but I don't know if we have time. I think Matt's got a jet. And maybe we have to bring you back, Jason, because I want to have a conversation with you about the state of the CI industry. Because, even though we're talking mostly luxury services, ideally, but I think there are some ideas that you have around the state of the luxury home service industry and how some things are broken, some things need to change. We didn't get there today. I want to have you back and have that conversation if you're open. If you're open for being open, which I am. Matt is going to be more scared of this conversation, I'm sure.
I don't think so. Jason and I have riffed on it. Actually, we're going to talk more about it next week. I think we should get into it in the next, let's spend the next 5 to 7 minutes talking about it. Let's do it.
Okay. Let's we got 5-7 minutes. Good. Matt, give me a little extra time. Awesome. All right. What's fucked up, guys?
So I'll give you 3 things, one of which we talked about. The hiring of new talent, right? We keep trading, recycling the same talent, and we have not figured out a way to find new talent and train them properly. There's some things that are trying to happen out there. The other one is that bringing in said talent, or bringing in experienced talent, and having a process to onboard them properly so you can retain them. That's another challenge. And then the last one we talked about, which is software, but that is a major problem. One, some of the software in our business, and then 2, actually how to find the right software. But I feel like those are the 3 things that are currently broken that need to get fixed for our industry to scale to that next level.
I was thinking a little broader.
Okay.
I think there's some bigger. So you're talking some. I think where Matt, you got something here.
Oh, yeah. I think the root cause of nearly all of those things is that the incentive systems in our industry are broken. So the industry we're talking about specifically is custom integration, where 60 to 70% of a project price or the revenue of these businesses is equipment, right? Let's call them cardboard boxes. So the incentives in our industry are to sell more cardboard boxes, because the manufacturers get paid, the dealer or the custom integrator feels great about themselves because they're doing more projects, their revenue is going up. It's a top line celebration, right? So in our industry, we celebrate top line revenue for everybody, which top line revenue, don't get me wrong, is really important. But here's the fact. Most of the issues in our industry can be solved if our integrators ran better businesses and made more money themselves. They were healthier businesses. All of those problems that Jason brought up and many more problems could be solved because they could solve these problems themselves. Running an integration company would be way more attractive than it is today, right? It's a lot of work with little reward, not because it has to be, but because the incentives are wrong. There's very few incentives for these integrators to run really healthy businesses. Nobody's celebrating that. Nobody's celebrating the bottom line. Nobody's celebrating revenue per employee. There's a lot of things that are not being celebrated. We're only celebrating moving a lot of boxes. All right, off the soapbox.
I think that's great. And I think it kind of gets into where I'm thinking about is you have this interplay between integrators, manufacturers, and buying groups and some other organizations that are involved in the middle. And two of those three, as you said, are very focused on boxes. Manufacturers care pretty much only about boxes. They say they want to help the integrators, but ultimately they want to help them so they sell more boxes. And then buying groups look at their name. A buying group is to sell more boxes. Even though they say they want to help the integrator, none of it sticks. And then the integrators fill these messages that are just project. Everyone talks about recurring revenue, but it never actually happens. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to take to change it. This actually may be why people are a little upset about Daisy too. It's like Daisy's focus is on trying to do all the other stuff, which people feel like it's changing what they do. I think actually integrators like selling boxes. I think they like technology.
Yeah,
right?
Oh yeah. Don't get me wrong. And again, I don't think the buying groups are absolutely providing a value.
For sure.
The manufacturers are absolutely providing value. So don't get me wrong. These people are providing value. I'm talking about the incentive side of it, right? It's like, for a buying group, for example, they're doing their best to create community and drive education and do all that stuff. But when it really comes down to it, there's not a big incentive for them to do that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think they approach it in a way of like, hey, we probably should do this, but the reality is like we need to keep moving a lot of boxes because that's the business model. And I don't want to speak for all of them. I think they're all doing a fantastic job of trying to solve for these because they recognize the issues too.
They do.
And when I say
it's just hard,
they're at least they're trying. I think many years back nobody was really trying. We were just talking about boxes, but I think honestly, I think there's an opportunity for a bit of a disruption here. And frankly, the integrator, my feeling is that the integrator deserves better. And I'm not saying that anybody is doing wrong by the integrator. The integrator is actually doing wrong by himself, not recognizing that like, hey, I actually don't care if I'm platinum level so-and-so. I care that I invested in real estate that I never thought was possible. Or I care that I'm building, lifetime wealth for my family. Like those are the kind of things that we should really be talking about and celebrating in this industry, in any industry, is that the people who are truly at the core of the industry, that they're succeeding at, in a way that they deserve to be.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys, but like whenever I talk to integrators or even basically any specialty trade, luxury home services, the owner is usually someone who loves selling the service or product or loves installing it, right? Or being the programmer. None of them love being the accountant. None of them love doing the purchasing, like all that operational stuff. So I definitely, and again, I think the buying groups and even the vendors are all trying to help them solve that problem, but not truly giving them what they need to solve that problem, which I think is what Daisy's trying to do and some of these other things. But I do think there is a gap somewhere there.
There's potentially an appetite problem too, right? Because if you look at the trajectory of most custom integration companies, they were founded by 20 or 30-year-olds. I think we can all recognize now that we're old enough to look back that those are your those are your prime hardworking years, right? Once you start getting outside of your 40s, you get to the end of your 40s, which I'll be 46 this year, so I don't know that I can speak to this from experience, but people share with me that like, hey, by the time you hit your 50s, you kind of don't want to work that hard. And I think maybe, generationally that's where we're at, or that's just the reality of things. But when an integrator gets to be that age, even though they might love selling or they might love installing, I think they start to realize like, hey, I need to build a valuable business if I'm going to, do something with it. I'd love to get them in their 20s or 30s to start building that foundation properly so that once they get to their 50s, they don't have to change anything. They just get to continue to reap the amazing rewards.
Yeah, get them early. I like it. Change that entire mentality of the installer. That's gonna be hard, man, because the guys who start that like to work with their hands. They like to move. They like to go fast. They're gonna buy a fancy car.
Yeah. Yep. No doubt.
We know that. All right. I think we can go deeper in this, but I think let's call this a day. Jason, thank you. Any last thoughts you'd like to add here?
No, I mean, it's 4 o'clock on a Friday, so my brain's pretty toast, but this was pretty awesome. And I think definitely we should do a repeat and go through this a little bit further because like Matt said, I think there's opportunity for disruption. I think it's what the industry needs and what a lot of these companies are craving for. We just don't know what that looks like or what it is.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do this disruption episode in a few months. That'd be really fun. Matt, anything from you?
No, this is great. Good to see you both. A couple of my most favorite people in the world, and good conversation.
All right. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time and listening to us. And as always, here in the Flywheel Effect, if you enjoyed this podcast, do one of three things. Give us a like, give us a follow, or share it with somebody who you think would find it valuable. And until next time, this is Brent, Matt.
Hey, real quick. How do people get a hold of Jason? So, Jason, you want to give us your social handles and stuff?
That's
I think
good.
that's
Let's do
important.
that.
And we'll make sure
we'll drop them in the notes too.
Yeah, I mean, find me on LinkedIn. I share a lot of content on there. I'm very active, but also just my website, www.iamsayen.com. And from there, you can book a meeting or reach out me directly to drop me a message.
All right.
Thanks for that, Matt. Appreciate it. Again, so drop us a like, drop us a follow, share it with someone you know. And until next time, here's the Flywheel Effect. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Flywheel Effect. Our journey through the intricate world of luxury home services continues to be fueled by your passion for excellence and innovation. If you found value in our conversations today, don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. More insights and resources. Visit us online at growwithvital.com. Until next time.